Have you ever wondered why someone can hurt you so deeply and still act like nothing happened? That moment when the pain hits, it feels like a punch to your soul. You question yourself. You replay every word, every glance, searching for the reason. Your chest feels heavy, your mind spins, and a part of you wants to scream while another part just wants to disappear. But deep inside there's a spark, a voice that whispers you don't have to break just because someone tried to break you. You don't have to respond in the way they expect. You can rise, not with anger or weakness, but with power that they won't understand. That is where your real strength begins. Pain is a powerful teacher. It strips away illusions and shows you who you really are. When a man hurts you, he often expects one of two things: your collapse or your chaos. Either you crumble into pieces or explode in anger. Both give him power. But imagine if you gave him neither. Imagine if you stood still, unshaken, unreadable. Imagine the confusion in his eyes when he cannot predict your next move. When your silence speaks louder than his words. When your calm feels like a storm he cannot control. That's the power of controlled mystery, and it forces him to face something far more unsettling than your tears, your strength. People are addicted to patterns. They rely on knowing how others will react so they can feel in control. The moment you step out of that pattern, you shift the balance. He may have thought you would beg, chase, or try to prove your worth, but instead you give him nothing familiar to hold on to. You step back, you breathe, you let your energy rise above his reach. This is not coldness, it's self-respect in action. It's the refusal to hand over your power just because he thought he could take it. This shift doesn't just confuse him, it awakens something inside you. You stop measuring yourself through his treatment, and you start seeing your own value in a way that no one can diminish. You remember that your worth was never meant to be negotiated. The confusion you create in him isn't about games. It's about breaking the control he thought he had. It's about showing, without a single word, that you are no longer on the battlefield he built. Stay here, because what comes next will give you the tools to master this power completely. You will learn how to hold your ground without closing your heart, how to confuse his expectations without losing your compassion, and how to turn the pain he caused into the strongest foundation you've ever stood on. By the time you finish, you won't just understand how to confuse him, you'll understand how to transform yourself into someone no hurt can break. The moment you stop reacting on impulse, you take back control of the game. Most people live as if their emotions are buttons for others to press. When someone hurts them, they respond instantly, without thought, without awareness, giving away the very power they wish they could keep. But when you pause, when you choose your response instead of letting pain choose it for you, something remarkable happens. You become unpredictable, and unpredictability is a form of strength that unsettles anyone who thought they could read you like an open book. When you withhold the reaction he expects, you plant doubt in his mind. Doubt about his influence, doubt about his importance, doubt about his ability to affect you. That doubt is not created by shouting or by proving a point. It is created in the quiet moments where you stand rooted in self-respect, offering no emotional fuel for his fire. The human mind craves certainty. And when certainty is taken away, it starts to search, question, and even panic. That is the confusion that shifts the dynamic in your favor without you saying a single word. This is not about becoming cold or detached. It's about choosing where your energy flows. Every emotional outburst you avoid is energy you reclaim. Every unnecessary explanation you skip is energy you save. That energy can then be used for something far more valuable, building yourself back stronger, clearer, and more aligned with the person you truly are. He may have caused the wound, but you decide whether that wound becomes a scar of strength or a place that keeps bleeding every time he touches it. By stepping back internally, you allow yourself to see more. You notice the patterns of his behavior without being trapped inside them. You recognize that his actions are a reflection of him, not a definition of you. This clarity is dangerous to anyone who benefits from your confusion or self-doubt. When you can see clearly, you no longer fight from a place of desperation, you operate from a place of choice. And choice is the ultimate power. You can choose silence over reaction, distance over chaos, peace over endless battles. You can choose to walk away without warning, or to stay while holding your boundaries like unshakable walls. Both will leave him uncertain, because the power is no longer in his hands. You're not playing his game anymore. You've created your own. The pain he caused may have been the spark, but what you do next is the fire. Every time you refuse to play the role he expects, you teach him and yourself a lesson about the kind of person you are becoming. You are not the version of you who accepts whatever treatment is given. You are the version who writes her own rules, and that transformation will always be the most confusing and unstoppable force he will ever face. Confusion is most powerful when it is paired with self-possession. It is not enough to hold back a reaction. You must also radiate a sense of inner certainty that cannot be shaken. This is the kind of energy that speaks without speaking, the kind that makes someone question whether they ever truly understood you. When you reach this state, his attempts to provoke you begin to lose their impact. They no longer find their mark, because you have risen above the level where his words or actions can touch your sense of worth. The mind of someone who tries to hurt you thrives on patterns of control. If he can predict your emotions, he can manage them. If he can manage them, he can manage you. Breaking this chain is not about fighting harder. It is about refusing to be part of the chain at all. You step out of the loop entirely. You stop feeding the dynamic that keeps you trapped. Instead of explaining, defending, or trying to make him see the damage he caused, you operate from a place where his opinion no longer determines your emotional weather. That is where his certainty collapses. Your silence is not emptiness. It is space for him to face himself. When there is nothing left to argue with, nothing left to manipulate, he is left alone with the weight of his own actions. People who expect you to break rarely know how to handle your composure. That composure forces them to deal with their own discomfort, and discomfort is a powerful mirror. Sometimes the most profound confusion you can create is making him realize that his influence is not only gone, it was never as strong as he believed. This is the turning point where your energy begins to shift from defense to creation. Instead of protecting yourself from his harm, you begin to build a version of yourself that is immune to it. You channel your focus into self-mastery, strengthening your mind, your habits, your boundaries, until his behavior feels small compared to the vision you have for your life. His attempts to provoke you become irrelevant because you are no longer seeking resolution from him, you are creating it within yourself. The most confusing thing for someone who tries to diminish you is to see you rise without needing their validation. It dismantles the entire narrative they built about you. It shows them that you are not bound by the version of you they tried to define. Every moment you choose calm over chaos, clarity over reaction, and self-respect over desperation, you rewrite the story they thought they could control. In this space, you are no longer simply protecting your heart, you are leading it. And when you lead yourself with that kind of strength, you stop being someone who can be hurt into submission. You become someone whose very presence is a quiet, unshakable statement. You will not be broken, and you will not be understood by those who seek to break you. Power grows in the space where you refuse to explain yourself to someone who has already decided not to understand you. When you stop trying to make them see your side, you free yourself from a losing battle. That freedom is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is quiet and unshakable. It is the kind of strength that moves beneath the surface, invisible yet undeniable. This is what creates true confusion in the mind of someone who tried to control you. They are used to being the center of your emotional attention, and when that spotlight goes dark, they are left stumbling in their own shadows. You must remember that the goal is not to punish or to seek revenge. The goal is to elevate yourself to a place where their behavior no longer has the power to pull you down. This requires discipline. It requires the ability to sit with your emotions without letting them dictate your actions. It is in that discipline where you start to notice the shift, not only in how he perceives you, but in how you perceive yourself. You are no longer operating from a place of reaction. You are operating from a place of deliberate choice. Every time you choose calm over chaos, you are training your mind to prioritize self-respect over the temporary relief of emotional release. That training compounds over time. You start to see how much energy you used to waste on arguments that went nowhere, on trying to convince someone who never intended to listen, on chasing clarity from a source that could never give it. When you stop doing that, you reclaim that energy for yourself. You begin to invest it in your growth, your peace, and your vision for the future. The more you grow in this way, the less predictable you become. The less predictable you become, the harder it is for him to navigate your presence. He can no longer rely on the patterns that once gave him the upper hand. His old strategies lose their effect because you have evolved beyond the version of you that they were designed to control. That evolution is not something you announce, it is something you embody. And embodiment is impossible to fake. When you embody this strength, you create a kind of confusion that is not rooted in manipulation but in transformation. He is not unsure of you because you are playing games. He is unsure of you because you have stepped into a level of self-possession he cannot influence. That is the deepest confusion you can inspire. It is not about what you do to him. It is about who you become in response to him. And when you become this person, you stop fighting to be understood. You stop begging to be valued. You stand as your own validation. That presence alone is enough to dismantle the control he thought he had. Leaving him with only one truth to face, you are beyond his reach. When you reach the point where his actions no longer dictate your emotions, you reclaim the most valuable thing you can ever own, your inner stability. Stability is magnetic. It draws respect from those who see it, and fear from those who cannot break it. It tells the world that you are no longer living in reaction to external forces. This is the kind of presence that changes how people approach you, because it communicates silently that you cannot be swayed by cheap tactics or shallow manipulation. That stability comes from knowing who you are without needing anyone else to confirm it. It is built in the quiet moments when you decide to protect your peace instead of proving your point. It is reinforced every time you choose to walk away from an unnecessary battle. And it becomes unshakable when you realize that no amount of chaos outside of you can control the calm you have cultivated within. This level of self-mastery is rare, and it is the exact reason why those who once hurt you will struggle to understand how to reach you now. Confusion arises because they still operate from the memory of who you used to be. They approach you with the same words, the same triggers, the same calculated moves, expecting the same results. But the old version of you no longer exists. Their strategies fail because you have evolved into someone who cannot be pulled back into patterns that once kept you small. This is not resistance out of spite. It is alignment with your true self. And alignment is the most powerful form of defiance there is. Every time you stand firm in this way, you teach your mind and body that you are safe without needing his approval. You stop chasing the closure you thought he owed you because you realize you can give it to yourself. This independence does not mean you are closed off. It means you are free. Free to feel without falling apart. Free to care without losing yourself. Free to decide without fearing disapproval. That freedom changes your energy completely, and people notice, even if they cannot explain why. What confuses him most is that you are no longer reactive to his presence but fully engaged in your own purpose. Your focus is no longer on him, yet your absence from his control becomes louder than any words you could say. The emptiness where your old responses used to be is now filled with strength, clarity, and self-direction. And the more you live in that space, the more he realizes that the version of you he could influence is gone forever. This is how you rise without confrontation. This is how you take back power without aggression. And this is how you show, without explanation, that the only person who decides your worth, your peace, and your path is you. The more you detach from his control, the more you begin to see how much of your energy was once tied to his approval. You realize how many of your choices were shaped by the need to be understood, accepted, or validated by someone who thrived on keeping you uncertain. This awareness is both painful and liberating. painful because it forces you to confront the ways you allowed yourself to be diminished, and liberating because now you hold the knowledge that you will never return to that place again. That is the kind of transformation that not only confuses him, but also changes you at the deepest level. This change is not about pretending you are unaffected. You feel everything, but you no longer let those feelings dictate your power. You give yourself permission to experience the hurt without letting it control your direction. This is a discipline of the mind and heart, a conscious choice to lead with clarity rather than impulse. And when you master it, you stop being a participant in his games and start becoming the one who defines the entire playing field. Confusion works in your favor because it interrupts the rhythm he relies on. Without that rhythm, he cannot predict you. Without predictability, he cannot manipulate you. And when his influence fades, the spotlight that once shined on him shifts back to you. You become the center of your own life again, and he is left outside, watching a reality he no longer has the ability to shape. In this new position, your silence becomes a force. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of power. The kind of silence that says, I don't need to explain myself to be whole. That silence unsettles him because it offers no entry point for his control. He cannot argue with it. He cannot twist it. It leaves him in a space where his only company is the echo of his own behavior, and that reflection can be more powerful than any confrontation you could ever give. You start to notice that you carry yourself differently. Your boundaries are no longer spoken, they are felt. People sense when they cannot cross certain lines with you, and that energy becomes your shield. It is not a wall to keep love out. It is a filter that only allows in what is worthy of you. And once you live in that space, going back to the old version of yourself feels impossible. This is where the true reversal happens. The man who once hurt you now faces a version of you he cannot define, predict, or control. That disarms him more than any anger or retaliation could. You have not just confused him, you have removed yourself from the reach of his influence entirely. And that is where your freedom becomes permanent. True strength is revealed when you no longer need to defend your worth to anyone. The moment you stop proving yourself, you stop living in someone else's definition of value. That shift is not just emotional, it is psychological liberation. It breaks the invisible chains that once kept you reacting, explaining, and chasing a form of acceptance that was never freely given. And when those chains fall, the person who tried to control you is left grasping at empty air, unable to understand why their influence no longer works. The power you carry now is quiet, but undeniable. It does not demand recognition because it already knows its own weight. This is the kind of power that turns confusion into a mirror, forcing him to see the gap between who he thought you were and who you have become. That gap unsettles him because it shows that you have outgrown the space where his presence once mattered. And nothing creates more uncertainty than realizing that someone who once sought your attention now receives none of it. This transformation changes the way you move through life. You begin to choose differently, not from a place of fear, but from a place of alignment. You say no without guilt, yes without hesitation, and walk away without looking back. Every choice reinforces your independence, and that independence erases the pathways he once used to reach you. Confusion deepens not because you are hiding, but because you are fully visible in your truth, and your truth no longer needs him. The more you embody this, the more your energy shifts. You stop bending to fit into spaces that shrink you. You stop tolerating behaviors that drain you. You stop engaging in battles that keep you small. Instead, you rise, not as a reaction to him, but as a commitment to yourself. That rise is unstoppable because it is rooted in self-respect, and self-respect cannot be taken, only surrendered. You have decided it is no longer for sale. This is where the dynamic completely reverses. The man who once caused your pain now struggles to place himself in your world. His attempts to pull you back into the old pattern fail because the old pattern no longer exists. Every effort to provoke you only highlights the distance between you and the version of yourself he remembers. That distance is the confusion, That distance is the barrier he cannot cross. You are no longer in competition for his attention, no longer dependent on his approval, no longer seeking the closure he will never give. You have created your own closure by stepping fully into your own power. And in doing so, you have made his role in your life irrelevant. That irrelevance is the final and most powerful form of confusion, because nothing is harder to control than someone who no longer needs anything from you at all. Freedom is not just walking away from what hurt you, it is walking into a version of yourself that cannot be touched by it again. That freedom begins the moment you stop letting your emotions be dictated by someone else's behavior. It grows each time you choose not to engage in battles that only drain your strength. It becomes unshakable when you realize that your peace is not something to be negotiated, bargained for, or handed over to keep someone else comfortable. This is the energy that creates lasting confusion for the one who once had influence over you. They expect resistance, they expect arguments, they expect you to fight for their attention or acknowledgement. But what they find instead is silence, clarity, and the kind of confidence that does not demand their approval. They cannot predict how to reach you because you no longer stand in the same place emotionally. You have moved forward, and every attempt they make to pull you back falls into emptiness. The strength you carry now is not a performance. It is not something you put on to seem untouchable. It is something you live. It comes from knowing that your worth exists whether anyone sees it or not. It comes from understanding that love is not proven through pain, and that loyalty should never require self-betrayal. With this clarity, you no longer wait for someone to give you the validation you have already given yourself. That independence cannot be faked, and it cannot be controlled. When he realizes that your life is no longer centered around him, the balance shifts entirely. The power he once held was never truly his. It was borrowed from the space you allowed him to occupy in your mind and heart. Now that space is yours again, and you fill it with things that build you instead of break you. This shift does not require his understanding, because it is not for him, it is for you. And the more you live in it, the more the past loses its grip on your present. Confusion is not the goal, it is simply the natural result of your transformation. By removing yourself from the cycle of reaction, you remove the very foundation on which his control was built. Without that foundation, he cannot stand in the same position in your life. His role becomes irrelevant, not because you forced it, but because you grew beyond the need for it. You have become someone whose strength is rooted in self-awareness, whose boundaries are drawn from self-love, and whose choices are guided by self-respect. And once you live from this place, you no longer need to announce your power. It speaks in every action, every silence, every step forward. That is the kind of presence that cannot be broken, cannot be controlled, and will always leave behind those who cannot rise to meet it. The greatest shift happens when you stop seeing yourself as someone who was hurt and start seeing yourself as someone who rose from it. That identity changes everything. It changes how you walk into a room, how you speak, how you make decisions. It strips away the need to be understood by those who will never understand, and replaces it with the certainty that you do not need their understanding to move forward. This is when you stop living in the shadow of what happened and start creating from the light you have built within yourself. Your energy is different now. It is steady, it is grounded, it is untouchable. People feel it before you say a word. The man who once thought he could read you now faces a mystery he cannot solve, because you no longer operate from the same emotional map. He cannot find the buttons to push, because you have removed them. He cannot find the weak spots, because you have turned them into strength. This is the kind of change that is irreversible because it comes from the inside out. Every moment you choose peace over chaos is a declaration to yourself that you are no longer available for the patterns that once kept you small. Every boundary you hold without apology is a reminder that your worth is not negotiable. These decisions compound over time until they become your natural state of being. And when you live in that state, nothing from your past can drag you back unless you allow it. Confusion for him is not just about your silence or your distance, It's about the fact that you no longer look to him for anything. Not for closure, not for validation, not for a sense of belonging. That absence of need is powerful. It dismantles the entire dynamic that once gave him influence, because influence requires access, and you have closed the door without making a scene. You have simply redirected your life in a way that leaves no space for what diminishes you. This is what true emotional mastery feels like. It is not about pretending nothing happened. It is about acknowledging it, learning from it, and then choosing to rise so completely that the memory of that pain no longer dictates who you are. That rise is not for him, it is for you, for the life you deserve, for the self you refuse to abandon. When you stand in this truth, you stop chasing and start attracting. You draw in people, opportunities, and experiences that match your new energy. You become living proof that no matter how deep the wound, the human spirit can rebuild stronger than before. And the man who once thought he had power over you will be left with nothing but the realization that the version of you he knew no longer exists, and she is never coming back. There is a unique kind of power in no longer being accessible to the energy that once drained you. It is not built from bitterness, but from clarity. Clarity about who you are, what you deserve, and what you will no longer allow into your life. This clarity does not make you hard, it makes you unshakable. It allows you to navigate the world without fear of being broken again, because you now understand that your strength does not come from avoiding pain. It comes from knowing you can rise above it every time. This unshakable presence is what creates the deepest confusion for someone who once relied on your emotional vulnerability. He cannot reach you in the same way, not because you built walls too high to climb, but because you no longer stand where he left you. You have outgrown the version of yourself that he knew, and in doing so you have removed the map he once used to navigate your emotions. Every attempt he makes to provoke a familiar reaction falls flat, and with each failed attempt, the reality sets in that the influence he once held is gone. Your life begins to feel lighter in this space. You stop replaying old conversations in your mind. You stop questioning your worth based on how someone else treated you. You stop living in reaction to the wounds they created. Instead, you live in alignment with the boundaries you have built. Boundaries that are not just spoken but lived. Boundaries that silently communicate your value without a single word. Confusion grows for him, because he cannot understand how you found this strength without him noticing. It is as if you disappeared from the place he could reach you, and reappeared in a place where he no longer matters. That realization is more powerful than any confrontation, because it forces him to see that you did not need his closure, his apology, or his recognition to become whole again. You became whole on your own. This level of transformation does not require you to diminish others. It requires you to elevate yourself. When you focus on your growth, you naturally outpace anyone who tries to keep you small. Your energy changes, your focus shifts, and your priorities align with the life you are creating, not the one you are escaping. And in that alignment, you find a peace that cannot be shaken by the noise of the past. The most profound confusion you can create is not through words, actions, or revenge. It is through your evolution. To stand in your power without needing to prove it. To walk away without anger. To live so fully in your worth that anyone who once doubted it can only watch from a distance. This is not just freedom. It is the ultimate statement that you are no longer within the reach of anyone who cannot rise to meet you. When you no longer seek validation from the outside, you become untouchable. The grip of external approval loses its power, and the noise of opinions fades into the background. You stop asking if you are enough and begin to live as if you already know you are. That certainty radiates from you in ways words could never capture. It shows in your posture, in the calmness of your tone, in the decisions you make without hesitation. People can sense it, and it draws them in, not because you are trying to attract them, but because your energy speaks louder than any attempt to impress ever could. This self-assurance is not arrogance. It is the deep understanding that your worth is constant, It does not fluctuate with someone's attention, affection, or approval. It remains steady in the face of rejection, unshaken by indifference, and untouched by the highs and lows of temporary emotions. This is the foundation upon which real confidence is built, the kind that cannot be faked, cannot be bought, and cannot be given to you by anyone else. The more you stand in this truth, the more magnetic you become. It is not the kind of magnetism that chases, it is the kind that invites. People feel safer in your presence because you are safe within yourself. You are not searching for someone to complete you, to define you, or to rescue you. You are already whole, and that wholeness makes you rare. Those who once underestimated you begin to see that you are no longer defined by the role they assigned to you. What unsettles them most is that you no longer react in ways they can predict. Their praise does not sway you, and their criticism does not weaken you. You are steady, anchored in self-awareness. This balance makes it impossible for them to manipulate your emotions, because they no longer hold the key to your self-esteem. You have reclaimed that power, and once reclaimed, it is not something you ever give away again. You begin to realize that the love, respect, and care you once tried to force from others were never yours to beg for. They were yours to give to yourself. And in giving them to yourself first, you set a standard so high that only those who truly value you will rise to meet it. This is the quiet strength that transforms your relationships, your choices, and the way you move through the world. Your life stops revolving around who notices you and starts revolving around how deeply you honor yourself. This shift changes everything. It is not about being unreachable. It is about being unshakable. And when you reach this place, those who once doubted you are left with no choice but to see the undeniable truth. You no longer need them to feel complete. And that freedom is the most powerful force they will ever witness. When you reach the point where you no longer chase, the dynamic of every connection changes. You are no longer driven by fear of loss, but by clarity of value. You know that what is meant for you will not need to be forced, manipulated, or begged for. This energy is undeniable because it carries a quiet certainty that cannot be mistaken for disinterest. It is the kind of presence that commands respect without ever asking for it, because it operates from a place of inner abundance rather than lack. The absence of desperation creates space for dignity to flourish. You stop negotiating with your self-worth in exchange for temporary validation. You stop over-explaining, over-giving, and overcompensating to prove your place in someone's life. Instead, you allow your actions, your standards, and your silence to communicate your worth far louder than words ever could. And those who understand it will lean in, because they feel the gravity of someone who knows exactly who they are. This is where power is reborn. Not in dominance, not in control over others, but in the unwavering control over yourself. You decide what you will accept, and you decide when to walk away. You no longer cling to what drains you, because you know that releasing what is misaligned creates room for what is meant for you. The act of letting go stops being a loss and becomes a declaration. It says, I will not shrink myself to fit where I don't belong. When you embody this, you stop trying to be chosen and start choosing. You no longer sit in the waiting room of someone else's uncertainty, because you understand that anyone who is unsure about you is not aligned with the depth you carry. Your time, energy, and presence become treasures you protect, not resources you pour into those who do not appreciate them. This changes how people treat you because they can sense that access to you is earned, not given freely to anyone who asks. Every interaction becomes a reflection of the energy you project. When your self-worth is unshakable, you attract people who are drawn to that strength, not those looking to exploit it. You begin to notice that those who once took you for granted now move differently around you. They speak with more care, they listen with more intention, because they know you are not afraid to remove yourself from anything that fails to honor you. This is the power of becoming self-contained. You do not need constant reminders that you are enough, because you live in a way that proves it to yourself daily. You are not searching for completion because you already stand whole. And in that wholeness you become both the standard and the inspiration, someone who is not defined by who stays or leaves, but by the unshakable truth of who they are.